Hi guys, and welcome back once again to my shop. For those of you who are new to this series or my channel, I'm Gregory Glessner, the owner here at Homestead Strings, and I'm glad to have you with me. This is the 5th installment of my 8-week series called Strings, How and Who. In the first 4 weeks, we explored some different aspects of string vibration and then bows. Now we're moving into the who part, where we explore some different violinists and how they contributed to the violin world. I encourage you to also watch the first 4 videos. The links are down in the description, and I encourage you to also subscribe to my channel. Before the 19th century, violin playing looked and sounded a lot different from how we know it today. Violinists were, and still are, trying to play more powerfully, expressively, and better than the next guy. I guess humans are just fascinated with making things bigger, louder, bigger, boom, better, I guess. That has driven the evolution of all aspects of playing. In this video, we'll look at 2 violinists from the 19th century and their contributions to making violin playing what it is today. These 2 guys, Louis Spohr from Germany and Nicolo Paganini from Italy, both lived at about the same time from the 1780s to the 1840s. They were leading violin virtuosi, and let's just say they were instrumental in many violin and orchestral developments we take for granted today. Even though Paganini is arguably the more famous one, we see and unknowingly appreciate more of Spohr's work as we go about our normal playing lives. Louis Spohr, he was also known as Ludwig, showed early talent for the violin. By the time he was a teenager, he was already a well-respected orchestra musician, and by the time he was a young man, he was already touring as a violinist around Europe. And in fact, he once toured with Paganini. Spohr was a big guy. He stood around 6 feet tall. And he had a lot of passion for not just violin, but he also composed, and he was an avid painter as well. He also had a lot of passion for chess and politics, the latter of which would get him into trouble late in his career. Most of Spohr's performing career really centered around conducting. He spent most of his life conducting various orchestras across Germany, and he even created some great innovations related to orchestras and conducting. Let's look at Spohr's major contribution to violin playing: the chin rest. The chin rest was invented partially to protect the top of the violin and the tailpiece from physical and chemical actions of the chin. The first chin rests were really just wooden blocks that went over the tailpiece. The top of the violin is very fragile and could easily crack under the pressure of an excited player pushing their chin into it. And skin oils are absolutely terrible on varnish and wood, not to mention if you have wire for facial hair, that's just not good, and that will wear through varnish and wood over time. The chin rest also gives us the nice side effect of being able to have a nice, comfortable hold on the violin. Most modern violinists are used to having a nice chin rest and a nice shoulder rest. Yeah, we're kind of spoiled. Shoulder rests didn't even come around until much later, and there's not much that we even know about their origin. Right now, we can support the instruments with our heads, leaving our left hands a lot of freedom, way more than people ever had in the 17th and 18th centuries. In the time when these did not exist, the violin was held with the chin on the E string side of the instrument. The left hand had a lot of responsibility for supporting the instrument. We like to shift a lot. Well, shifting was really hard. We like to use a ton of vibrato. Well, if I tried this like this, whoa, that's not good. Back in the good old days, violinists hung out a lot around like third-ish position and just crept around and extended fingers to get the notes that they wanted. Vibrato was seen as a special effect reserved only for long notes, when it could be well set up. The violin could be held well with the shoulder, and then you could do it. As we know, violins can feel slippery and squirrely even on the best of days, especially if there's nothing to hang on to. Even without a shoulder rest, having a little bit to hang on to with a chin rest, even if it was just a wooden block, meant a lot. This opened up more possibilities of playing faster, shifting a lot more, using a lot more vibrato, and playing a lot more double stops. Some violinists, myself included at this time, actually don't use a shoulder rest because we find that the chin rest and the collarbone can work well enough. Although not everybody should be doing that, and sometimes I even question my own wisdom. But that's beside the point. We don't even know how spoiled we are right now. There are so many different types of shoulder rests and chin rests available. Even in a tiny shop like mine, I stock different models of each, and a quick Google search will turn up endless possibilities of combinations of shoulder rests and chin rests. Spohr, as a composer, took advantage of his new innovation, or the chin rest. He wrote music that basically required this innovative new hold on the violin, where the chin would actually move more towards the center, or even to the side that we hold it on now. He loved to write double stop passages that sound great when performed with the precision and confidence they need, but really terrible otherwise. While Spohr's music itself isn't that progressive in terms of harmony and form, he also started other trends that we depend on today. As the renowned conductor that he was the first to popularize the use of the baton. And he invented a saving grace of the modern orchestra rehearsal. The rehearsal letter. Or sometimes we use numbers or Roman numerals. Every time you have a nice marked spot to start or stop in a rehearsal or reference with somebody, say a big thank you to Mr. Spohr for that. Even though Spohr was not particularly progressive with his own compositions, he was highly influential to the likes of Richard Wagner and Hector Berlioz, who both broke a lot of new ground with regards to form and harmony, not to mention the fact that they both greatly expanded the scope of sound in an orchestra. Both of those guys loved big orchestras. I don't know if Spohr is to blame for that or not. The end of Spohr's career was kind of sad. I think it came about after a political dispute between Spohr and his patron while he was court conductor at Kassel, Germany. After this dispute, Spohr basically got fired. Unfortunately, that kind of crap still happens today. You know, politics, they're always touchy. I don't know why they get touchier when musicians get involved. Spohr's official career ender came when he broke his arm. I wonder if those two incidents are related. Nicolo Paganini was probably one of the most influential violinists to ever live. He was an unfortunate example of a young man, though, who couldn't handle the fame that befell him. By age 16, he was, as we say in this century, a hot mess. He had fallen victim to gambling and drinking. But before it was too late, a woman took him in as a son and I guess whipped him into shape. Because by the time he was 23, he had made his public reappearance, and before that public reappearance, he had practiced the violin a lot. And he also mastered guitar. In addition to Paganini's violin works, he also wrote some really great violin and guitar works that guitarists absolutely adore to this day. Speaking of his compositions, his style, like that of Spohr, was musically not that progressive. He wrote largely using the forms, sounds, and structures that were being used by others at the time. Progressive, however, was what he pushed out of the violin. Paganini pushed sounds and techniques out of the violin that were never before heard. Of course, his greatness, now I don't want to make it like the violin is everything. I think his greatness was helped by his instrument. He primarily played a violin by Guarneri del Gesù known as Il Canone, or the Cannon. Now there's a reason this thing was called the Cannon. It was powerful. He also had the latest, greatest innovation in bows. Paganini was among the first to extensively use the design of bow that we know today. This design was pioneered in France by François-Xavier Tourt. By the time Paganini was coming to fame, the violin bow had already developed its inward or concave camber. Previous bows actually had an outward camber. Bows were getting longer, they were getting heavier, and the head of the bow had gotten taller, which allowed for more spring room in the stick. Along with these trends, the frog had some developments too. Previously, the hair was held into the frog just by a plug and nothing else. Watch my video on bows if you haven't already. They didn't have the benefit of the slide protecting all of this delicate stuff, and they didn't have a ferrule and a wedge that hold the hair in a very, very even and secure ribbon. Bows also got larger mortises, or holes where the hair goes in. This allowed for bows to hold more hair. More hair allowed a more powerful attack on the strings. The head of the bow, in addition to getting taller, had also gotten the addition of the tip plate. Previous bows only had just the wood of the stick. The tip plate allows a more secure hold on the hair without risking cracking the tip. Paganini used all of these innovations to his advantage. Bows are so much more robust now, and I guess after all these innovations had taken place, than they were before. Heavier, bigger, more powerful, more secure. What can go wrong? Paganini greatly influenced violin technique, from the sonority of his sound to his virtuosity, his ability to play fast, and his groundbreaking new techniques, one of which is double harmonics. A harmonic is simply when a violinist pushes very, very lightly on a string to divide its vibrating length. The length can be divided into 2, 3, 4, or 5 different sections. As you divide the string into more sections, obviously those sections, they have to get a lot smaller. And as we know, longer strings make lower pitches, and as the string gets really short, it makes much higher pitches. Harmonics create a very sparkling or maybe even whistly sound, hopefully. Harmonics can be natural, which is what I just played, where one finger touches an otherwise open string, or they can be artificial, where one finger plays a real note, like this, and a higher finger touches a point on the string. In almost any case with harmonics, there's almost no margin for error. Double harmonics are basically when you play 2 harmonics at once. Whether they're artificial or natural, one of one, one of the other, it doesn't matter. If you play 2 harmonics, it's a double harmonic. Depending on the combination of harmonics, sometimes all 4 of the violinist's fingers have to hit the exact right spots at the exact right times. And if that doesn't happen, you gotta mess. They're really finicky. Let's watch a much younger me try this. You know, the one with more hair on top and less around here. My older brother, who produced that video for me, still has more hair on top than I do. It's not fair. Let's watch. Another interesting technique that Paganini introduced was left-hand pizzicato. We all know that pizzicato means you're plucking the string. Usually that happens with your right hand. But no, Paganini wasn't happy with that. He did it with his left hand. Combining notes that are plucked with the left hand with bowed notes creates an interesting texture of sound, because those two varieties of sound completely different. And when they're juxtaposed that closely, audiences can't really believe that they're hearing those two sounds out of the same violin at the same time. It's really cool. Here's another clip of a much younger me playing a passage that has both left-hand pizzicato and, only single harmonics. Yes, that's my brother playing the piano. It's from Glazunow's Violin Concerto. This piece was written in 1904, several decades after the time of Paganini. But without Paganini, this would not have been possible. Let's watch this. Paganini was not just a violinist. He was an absolutely talented showman. He had a special gift of selling his performances. And with all this interesting stuff in his playing, I think it was pretty easy to sell, don't you? In addition to his playing genius, Paganini is also thought to have had either Marfan syndrome or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Either one of these different genetic disorders would have affected his connective tissues, including tendons and stuff in his joints, and that made his hands really, really flexible. Even though Spohr and Paganini knew each other, in fact, it was around the age of 30 for each of them that they toured Italy together, they weren't really working on the same things at the same time. We have to keep in mind that development in music and so many other subjects at that time was not sequential and it was not linear. There were a lot of different people working on different things at the same time. Information back then traveled at literally the pace of a horse or a ship or a person walking. As soon as I upload this video, anybody in the world will be able to watch it with the click of a mouse. That just didn't happen back then. And in fact, somebody could even be watching me film this right now. That's kind of scary. The pace of information sharing that we have today means that people collaborate all the time from across continents. That simply did not happen back in the 19th century, when many people developed their own things at their own pace without outside influence. Instead of advancing music composition, these two guys advanced other aspects of musicianship and especially violin playing. Who doesn't appreciate rehearsal numbers or letters? Who doesn't appreciate the dazzling techniques that Paganini invented? The Glazunov Concerto is one of my favorite pieces, and it would not have been possible without the innovations of Spohr and Paganini. Glazunov used a ton of double stops in places, and the passage that we just saw, need I say more, it's a great passage. I would like you to listen to some music by Spohr and Paganini. Unfortunately, we don't have recordings of them because, get real, they came before the time of recording technology. I want you to hear Spohr's Duo Concertante in D for 2 violins. The performance I want you to listen to is by Pinchas, Zukerman, and Itzhak Perlman, 2 great violinists of our time. If that has to change because copyright, links breaking, whatever, I'll note that and try to provide a new link. The Paganini example is his Caprice number 9 of his 24 Caprices. This video is a full version of the clip that we saw earlier. I hope you enjoy both of these performances. This video took a little bit of external research for me, so I'm linking the things that I read down in the description. A lot of what they contain would be off topic for this video, but they do make great further reading, so I recommend investigating them. I also take no responsibility for the owners of these links breaking them.